For over half a century, humans have endeavored to make business a force for good. But is the movement working? Or is it time to explore a new path forward? Welcome to Less Talk, More Action. We are your hosts, Joel Caesar and Owen Barrett, experts in clean energy, net zero real estate, decarbonization, and entrepreneurship. In each episode, we ask provocative questions and share stories from the front lines of sustainability with leaders in science, tech, and business taking real action to design a cleaner, better future. Thanks for joining the conversation. Now, let's get to work. Welcome to Less Talk, More Action podcast. My name is Joel Caesar, the world's undisputed voice. Building Decarbonization. Joining me as always is Owen Barrett, the founder and CEO of America's fastest growing solar company. Today's guest, Alex Edds, a leading voice in sustainable real estate, innovation, Proptech, 15 years in senior roles like JLL, Nuveen, LaSalle. I mean, he's a real estate sustainability blue chipper, comes from across the pond. So he's got his specific knowledge that's more focused on the UK and Europe. But of course, as we know, he worked for big global companies and sees the world the way we do it. Cool guy. What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, I said it on the podcast, but I think the part that stuck with me the most today and will stick with me is this: you were beginning to see the industry go back to where it started, which was on project implementation and execution, where yes, there's data and reporting requirements, but everyone's sick of it, trying to, in my perspective, think through like the fastest, most efficient way of doing it, and then refocusing on doing projects that actually drive impact. And hearing him say it is just, it's music to my ears.
Yeah. Well, like I said on the pod, he's one of those guys. He had like an awesome job on paper, like head of sustainability for LaSalle Asset Management in Europe. Like, if you're in sustainable real estate, it's one of the most coveted jobs you could get. Yeah. And he just bailed. It was like, this is boring. And it's because I saw him on a panel he was on a panel with Steph, my one of our co-founders, and of course we're like, oh, we got to settle this guy. Like, he's on the panel with Steph, awesome. And then I heard him on the panel again, never met him before. He's basically just like railing on reporting and compliance, and I just be like, oh, this guy's awesome. He's gonna see the world leader. And of course, that was like September 2025, and that was like right when he was leaving LaSalle. So it was like pretty interesting how he decided let's take the filter off.
Yeah, no, it's cool. He's a cool guy.
Yeah, well, a great guest, and he's got his own podcast, which is good stuff. I've been listening to him, so it's he's a really wealth of knowledge and interesting perspective. So he's I think someone our audience is really going to resonate with. And with that, let's dive into a bit. We're calling Owen the hater. Owen hating on his co-host's business. So
honest Owen.
Yeah. So on a Cambio LinkedIn post where we were celebrating how we're working with Nuveen, one of the world's biggest commercial real estate entities, on how they're deploying Cambio's AI platform to identify energy efficiency, and we're streamlining their need for energy audits and how slow and costly and ineffective that process is, and deploying Cambio's version of AI to identify these energy efficiency projects at scale. So LinkedIn post, Cambio, Nuveen, we're celebrating. Everyone's feeling good about it. And on the post, on the comments, Owen, being a jerk, comments hating on Cambio, saying none of these projects are going to happen, basically. So I commented below. One of my colleagues at Cambio was like, "Yo, what's with your boy hating on our LinkedIn post?" So I was like, "All right, I'm not gonna like air this grievance on the LinkedIn comments. Let's bring it to the podcast." So that's what we're doing. Like, what's your problem?
I'm not taking shots at Cambio. I'm more taking, well, maybe a little bit. I've had a realization. AI will not solve decarbonization in the built environment, period. It won't do it. And the reason why it won't do it is because it's not solving the right problem. The problem is not getting data. Yes, it used to be slow, and yes, it used to be expensive, and now it's faster and cheaper. And that's great. We can celebrate that. But getting faster, cheaper data is not going to make more projects happen. And that's the root of the issue. And that's what AI can't solve yet. Maybe it will, but like, let's revisit this in a year and 2 years and 3 years and see how many of those projects Nuveen did. I bet it's zero.
It's
but
not
they
zero.
got the data and they can report it.
We're under NDA. I can't tell you how many, but it's not zero. It's working. So let's. But that put aside, I'm gonna agree with you and disagree with you at the same time. As you know, one of my favorite LinkedIn posts, I have it pinned to the top of my account, starts with, this was 2 years ago, pre-Cambio. Software does not decarbonize buildings. Writing reports about how to decarbonize buildings does not decarbonize buildings. Developing greenhouse gas accounting frameworks does not decarbonize buildings. Like, this was my post. And I did this 2 years ago. That post is now up to, what does it have? Over 100,000 impressions, 110 comments, 700 likes. So it's like this post really resonated with our the wider industry. Some didn't like it, some did, right? But like, same perspective you're bringing to the table here. Like, let's just be honest. Even as someone who loves what we're doing at Cambio, like, yes, software is not decarbonizing buildings. That said, on a recent episode, who was it? It was with a guy from Gradient, where you were starting to ask him about one of our buildings in Texas that you and I are owners on, where we need lots of help. And there was an idea maybe Gradient, maybe their heat pump, their window heat pump installation could help us. And in your Q&A with him, you asked him, hey, so if I give you like our water bills and our energy bills, like, would you be able to give me like a rough back of the napkin like analysis of whether or not your solution will give us a good return? And he was like, yeah, of course, that's what we do. And I was sitting there thinking, that's what Cambio does at scale. So you just asked him for what you're saying doesn't help.
I'm not saying it doesn't help. Well, but we've had a follow-up conversation about this, and I think this would be an interesting thing to do on the pod is let's do it. Let's run the property through Cambio. Let's see what the results are, and then let's get an actual bid from a contractor about what the numbers really would be to do it, and then let's compare because I have no basis in what I'm about to say. From what I've seen, except in the solar realm, from what I've seen AI try to do and estimate cost and savings for solar, it's so bad that it's worthless. Now, I don't know that that's true for HVAC, and I don't know that that's true for lighting. But if it is, we're just speeding up the data process and riddling it with junk. So, like, I'm not convinced that that really has value. Now, there's an easy way to get to the bottom of this, and it's use our property in Texas and like really run through it. I think it would be interesting to see. I think our 100 listeners would find value in that too. But that to me is like the only way to get to the root of this. Because if it comes back that the estimates are equal, then yeah, I'll take back everything I just said. You guys have huge value. You're going to solve climate change. But if it's an order of magnitude off, is it really valuable?
Yeah, well, and like I think even like you said, you and I have had this conversation offline. I don't think we're trying to be equal to you, who's like going to go out and actually do the project. We're trying to be directionally so that like the owner knows there is a solar opportunity on a specific asset. But look, we're not opposed to the challenge, and I think we can sit here and debate this all day on a podcast. Or like you're saying, let's take the
Let's
theme
do
of the
it.
show and go take action and see the results. So, with that, that's a great segue into a great conversation with our guest, Alex Edds. Joining us today is Alex Edds, a leading voice in sustainable real estate, innovation, and Proptech. After more than 15 years in senior sustainability roles across the industry, including leadership positions at JLL, Nuveen, and LaSalle, Alex now runs his own advisory business focused on sustainability, technology, and innovation. Today, he works with real estate companies to help them navigate decarbonization without in-house teams and with prop tech startups to refine their go-to-market strategy and product roadmap. He's also the host of the Future We Build podcast, where he explores the ideas and innovations shaping the future of the built environment. So, Alex, welcome to Let's Talk More Action.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Finally on.
Well, we've been courting you for a while for your expertise, your brilliance, and your fellow podcast stardom. So, as a fellow podcast host, we gotta get right to work here and dig into the details. So, Alex, how are you taking action to make the world a better place?
Well, I guess I'm taking a leaf out of your book in that I have set up for my own podcast, The Future We Build, as you mentioned. Season one is almost finished. And yeah, I did that because, and probably same with you guys, right? It was, I've been to conferences, I've been to events, sat on panels, done all of that for over a decade now. And you're always kind of left feeling a little bit like underwhelmed by those things. You've got some really high quality, high caliber people in a room, especially if you're there as an audience member, you really want to learn, you really want to listen to the sort of, the detail, and all you get is sort of really kind of high level questions, and it's just people bouncing around on, talking points. And I just often found that really frustrating. And I think, podcasts are a really cool long form, opportunity to delve into the detail, and that's exactly what I wanted to do, is reach out to people that are making a difference, or I think are making a difference, and understand how they're doing it, what they're doing, what the challenges are, and communicate it, and ultimately try and educate and raise awareness. So similar to what you guys are doing over in the States, I'm trying to do something similar here in the UK.
Alex, this is interesting because Joel and I, we talk about this a lot. We both go to a lot of conferences. We've been going to conferences our whole life. It's always sort of the same faces talking about the same thing, the same format. We think the conference format is broken. Do you think there's a new form factor it can take, or do you just think, like, to your point, there's things like podcasts, there's YouTube, like there's just different mediums of media that we should be using instead of conferences?
I mean, I listened to one of your podcasts where you mentioned this explicitly, specifically, and I fully agree with you. I mean, I'd be curious to know, out of other sectors, like, what works better. I'm mindful of the fact that real estate likes to think that it's always like people first, people business. Therefore, we always have to come together. But whether or not other forms of medium would also work, I don't know. But I mean, I think you mentioned one that you did, but I went to one recently, and it was like at a surfing,
Yeah.
wave pool.
Yeah.
And so you get people out of their comfort zone. You get them out of their suits, and that just changes people, right? It just changes the way that you connect with people, and you can have a different kind of conversation. So, yeah, I think I think it would be good for the event organizers out there, or maybe newcomers coming in. Let's just try something different. Let's just try some new approaches to it. And I think, there's definitely a place for podcasts. I mean, I don't know whether you guys have done this, but I've actually reached out to a couple of big events this year with the plan to take the podcast there and actually do, the sort of the podcast, on the sort of event floor, as it were. So it's sort of a bit of a hybrid, but well, let's see how that goes. But yeah, I fully agree with you. Needs a bit of a shake up.
Yeah, we've had that idea too. We're exploring some options. I saw you recently post, Alex, about how you're taking the podcast on the road, which we're
Yeah,
impressed by.
yeah.
Well, so speaking
Let's
of
see, how it's going to go.
speaking of seeing things differently, thinking differently, which I think is going to be theme here in this conversation, I met you at Proptech Connect in London. You were on a panel with my the Cambio co-founder Stephanie Grayson. So I remember, I was there just to support Steph and listening in, and you said something on the panel about I won't, it's paraphrasing. I don't exactly. You probably said it more eloquently, but it was about too much noise, too much talking, not enough like projects being done. And I remember, obviously you've now listened to this podcast and you get a sense of a little
Yeah.
bit of how Owen and I are, and we tend to think like we're outliers. Like, it's like crazy that we're the ones, like the minority almost, or maybe it's the silent majority, but not a lot of people speak up on a panel like you did, and we're like basically calling out the industry like we like to do. So I guess I'll just build off of there. Where does that mindset come from in your career? Is it like the experience you've had at various stops? Is it something you think can be fixed? And what do you think the way forward is for the wider industry?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in that, but I think, trying to summarize it down, I think, my career. So I think, in answer to your question, it's, just the way I'm built, and probably that all of us, right, we have to sort of share that sort of DNA, is just that frustration of the sort of glacial pace, and also I think for my own kind of sanity of just, I want that feedback loop, or I want to see something happening. I want to be able to see what I'm putting in, my inputs, and kind of what the outcomes of that are. And without going into a sort of going too much into the background, but I sort of started out as, typical thing like consultant. Went into JLL, became a consultant there, and then it was about 10 years of that, and I found, and eventually I just sort of hammer noticed it, and I was like, look, I'm out. And the principal reason of that was because, GRESB had started, we'd had all these kind of new benchmarks arrive, lots of the reporting kind of data thing was just kind of really getting started. But it was just requiring a huge amount of effort and resource and time, and obviously a lot of that was coming onto us as consultants. just to churn through, and it was just like becoming really repetitive. I was like, I just don't want to do this. So that's the first time I guess I left. I left JLL, and somewhere along the line, I sort of, out of the peripheral vision, really, I guess, came this sort of emergence of tech, now called Proptech, and just seeing, I guess, for me, having been in a corporate and having been quite blinkered with, how you do things, suddenly there were like these new people, new energies, new ways of doing things. That I thought, well, that's different, that's new, that's creative, that's entrepreneurial, and so that really led me down a different path, and I ended up, and I'm thankful to JLL leadership for giving me the opportunity, but basically created a new role in JLL as innovation director for the UK, to try and just accelerate this stuff. Right? It's like, well, hold on, these companies are sort of pitching, they're coming to us, they're coming to our clients, and they all have the same problem, which is like, we can't get through the front door. The clients aren't really listening to us. We can't really, get pilots off the ground. And my view was like, well, if JLL can't help you, then no one can. So that was the kind of thesis that led to, fortunately them backing me to do that role. And long story short, but if you know JLL, you'll know that they've since launched a VC fund. They've created this huge technology business. Then obviously COVID came and sort of put a bit of a squash on some of that momentum. But I think, in answer to your question, it was just that eagerness to see, is there a different way of addressing this problem that everyone seems to be trying to solve? I would add to this, my decision to go back into, if you like, that sort of corporate role. I guess I knew in some ways that was going to be a revert to the past, and I really sort of lingered on that decision for quite a long time as to whether or not it was the right decision to go back in and do that, without going over the whys and wherefores and whether it was the right decision or not. I think the ultimate end decision was, can I be in a position where I'm on the other side of the table and I can actually be, if you like, the client or the customer, and try and assemble a new way of delivering fundamentally and take sort of decarbonization, like how to deliver that at pace, at scale, quicker, faster, than has been traditionally done. That was what I went in with rose-tinted goggles, as it were, and was hoping that I could do that. Certainly there was some successes, but I think, and this probably comes back to your point around, you guys feeling like you're on the edge of it. Once you're inside it, and you have that weight of all the things that go with being in a big corporate, certainly one that's regulated and certainly one that has so many different masters, it becomes really difficult to be nimble. And so I think in some ways that answers your question. It's just that fundamentally the people that are controlling the capital, or the majority of the capital, have so many constraints on them.
Are not nimble.
It just means that it's very difficult to be nimble. And again, I think, after 3.5 years of being in that role, I was also getting like, okay, I think it's clear to me that that's what this role is going to be. And we can talk about, the roles of sustainability leaders and what that may or may not become in the future. But I think, I was finding myself becoming like really closely aligned with like compliance. And
well, I'm looking at my message. I DM'd you on September 5th, 2025. So I've been a couple days after Proptech in London, where you were representing LaSalle as the head of Europe sustainability. I said, hey, Alex, I loved your reporting compliance fatigue takes on the panel at Proptech. And I said some other niceties. And you responded, yep, least favorite part of my job. So, you're going to find alignment here on this podcast with reporting and compliance being just way over indexed in these roles.
No, I mean, it's interesting because, well, a couple of things. You said a lot of fascinating things, but Alex, I don't know if you've listened to enough of the podcast to sort of see its transformation over time, but we're starting to take on this, like, how I built this of clean tech startups, which is like really fun for Joel and I, because it's fun to talk to people like you and different founders. And I think one of my favorite parts of speaking to people like you and other founders is, what was the breaking point that forced you out of like the cushy corporate job? Because most people like us have that. Like, eventually you hit enough bureaucracy, enough just like craziness that you take a step back. But I want to ask you something that I've been talking to Joel about on the side, and that's that it gets back to the like reporting compliance and all of the time and money that's spent on this stuff. Like, do you think it's a race to the bottom with where software is going in AI? And do you think eventually it becomes free? Because that's sort of our take, or it gets close to it. But I'm curious, I don't live in that world as much as you two do. So I'm curious to get your perspective there.
What I think it was the first board meeting I went to at LaSalle. I presented, and I sort of did this on the back of it was a bit of a sort of, I tried to pull some data points together of like how to calculate this because it was quite difficult to calculate. Was how much time my team was spending on, data reporting, emails, just all the kind of admin that goes along with, this job, and it was a scary number. Like it was 2/3 of their time or something.
Oh my God. That's the worst data point we've heard on the podcast.
And I presented it, and I was sort of quite objective about it. I said, look, this is what's happening. And I had the feeling, which I'm guessing you guys had, which was sort of loaded in that, well, this is ridiculous. Like, we need to sort of flip this around at least. But the response was, well, regulated industries, we've got a lot of regulation to meet. There's a lot of red tape to get through. Frankly, the job, a large part of the job for people controlling capital is reporting. That is fundamentally what they do.
Not just sustainability, like reporting
Not
in
just
general across. Yeah,
100%. No, and so in some ways they saw it as, well, you're now a new extension of the business, whether that's finance, accounts, investor relations, whatever it is. You're now just another department, and you're going to have to do a lot of reporting because that's what we have to do as regulated industries. So I think that's something which I'm sure if you went into other parts of the banking and finance sectors, you'd probably see similar. So I think, unfortunately, I mean, I'm speaking obviously here from a perspective of investment management within the regulated sector. That that isn't always the case within real estate, but I do think in some ways that's inescapable. So to answer your question around technology, I think it has to, because, and this is a different point, but I think a lot of those business models are a little bit under threat. Not least because of what's going on in the world, and the world's a different place right now. But looking after people's money and then allocating it into real estate, that becomes quite, you've got to be able to defend the value of doing that. And I think there are some new business models basically that can emerge that could disrupt that. So I think being able to defend that position means that you can't be heavy on your labor. So you're going to have to find ways to be much leaner on doing that. And I think clearly, if you can use AI to sort of execute that sort of burden of reporting and data, then I think absolutely. So I think there are going to be that's clearly going to be an area of big focus for a lot of those companies. Yeah.
Well, there's so much. I would love to, like Owen said, we love your kind of personality on this show for a variety of reasons. Like, one, you've left big corporate and now you're in doing your own thing. So we want to get there at some point, like just learn about the entrepreneurial perspective. But this also, you're one of a few people we've had on who's like recently was head of sustainability at a large commercial real estate entity that Owen and I both like to sell into and have experience in, and now you're doing your own thing. Like you're probably I think the third person, like sort of like this, where like fresh out of being in that seat, now maybe can be a little more hot takes on a podcast. But I'm going to ask more tactical, like learning perspective here. Again, Owen and I, we're both selling into, when we see someone like you at a conference, we're like, I got to sell to Alex. Alex should buy Cambio. Alex should buy Shine, and we're going to be selling. So let's be real.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but you've been sold to a lot in your career, I'm sure. And I like you, I've had some roles that were internal and some are now where I'm selling. And I try to take the perspective, like, when I was at Google, I got sold to a lot, and sometimes it's annoying, but like I also needed solutions. So you have to sell. But I guess like, to the Proptechs vendors out there, whether they're Cambio software folks or they're like Owen doing Shine or all the other cool technologies you and I might see at these conferences that we should have a place in our building, should be able to get pilots off the ground. Do you have any advice on like selling, like working with someone like you to get those things deployed?
To be honest with you, in some ways, not much has changed from like 10 years ago when, I sort of first got excited or interested in this space. And as I say, created that new role at JLL. And I did some advisory stuff on the side back then as well. And I know it sounds really cheesy, but it's like know your customer. And what I mean by that in our industry is you've got, unlisted, regulated investment managers that invest in typically kind of high value, real estate. But their business model is they're effectively taking capital from someone else, they're allocating it, and they're obviously just following benchmarks and trying to get a return. And they'll typically sell that within 7 to 10 years. If you then go along the value chain and you're dealing with like a family office and we have a lot of them here in the UK, whether you've got them in the States, but they'll never sell, right? They own big footprints of typically kind of quite condensed geographical space, and they'll never sell them. And so for them, it's a very different conversation about what the building, what the project means for them, and what it means for the the legacy of that company. And then there's kind of everything in between. And obviously, real estate goes all the way down to probably people that you're not going to sell to, but private landlords. And so I am often find when I'm speaking to tech companies that are trying to sell, or any company that's trying to sell, is you've got sort of one size fits all product, one size fits all kind of commercial model, and you're trying to sell it to these different entities that all kind of have a slightly different business model. And so I think it's really important to understand who you're speaking to. Are you speaking to the asset manager? Are you speaking to the fund manager? Are you speaking to the property manager? Are you speaking to director of development? Where they are on the life cycle of that asset, that's also really critical. If they're about to go into development or refurb, happy days, they've got loads of money, they'll be willing to spend it. If they've just shut that down, secured a lease, and they're hoping that no one's going to bother them for 3 years, they don't really want to spend any money. So understanding that cycle is also really important. But yeah, I think just really it's that I would say is the first and foremost. And one of the things I say to companies I help now is in that first meeting or that first call, or even at the event, come away with understanding kind of who makes the decision, where they are, on that life cycle, and ultimately kind of how much of a priority this is for them. And I think that armed with that, you can then kind of curate a much more compelling. You can go into the room being much clearer about, okay, I know who I'm talking to, and I know what I've got to try and do to convince them that this is the right solution for them. So, yeah, I mean, it's not rocket science, right? But it's understanding a little bit about the nuances of our industry, which often if you haven't been in it, can be a bit alien to some people.
Alex, I got a follow-up question that's related. So we had a guest on the podcast. I can't remember his name, but he gave Joel and I some advice that was basically don't sell to anyone other than the CEO. Like, don't waste your time on the underlings. And I'm starting to come to a similar understanding for my company, which is despite being a solar company, we don't like selling to ESG departments because they more often than not fuck these projects up, and they just get stuck in analysis paralysis and they don't get it. And as soon as we get to asset management or the C-level, it's a way easier conversation, much faster implementation. You have any guidance or advice for if you're stuck in that ESG silo? How do you get out of it? How do you try and convince the C-suite that yes, you may be an ESG project, but like that's a bucket that you're categorized in, but you're more of like a value add project that they're more accustomed to.
Yeah, I mean, look, I fully, and I've heard you say this before, right? And I fully sympathise because I think it's, I recognise that. This is probably unhelpful to say, but I also think that it slightly depends, and again, it comes back to my point before, right? It slightly depends on the company. So, at LaSalle, what we did in Europe was we actually brought in 2 technical engineers to be within my, to sit within my team, but then they partnered with the asset management team. And so they were execution first delivery team. And so actually in our case, or in that case of LaSalle's case, they were there to actually help move things faster, and that's what they did. But it was only because they were connected to the asset management team and had the ear of and sat in those meetings, and basically were an extension of the asset management team. So in that regard,
But
that's where it's been.
in that case, Alex, was that like your idea? Like, hey, we got to set this up differently. Like, where did that new type of organizational structure come from?
I mean, some of it was sort of laid by my predecessor, but also it was just, yeah, I guess it was something that it was clear to me, right, is that the number one priority coming into that role was decarbonization. We just set, as everyone did, right, net zero targets, and it was like, well, we're going to do an awful lot of audits. We're then going to have to do something with all this information. What the hell are we going to do with it? So it was clear that without asset management sort of alignment and involvement, this was just going to go nowhere. And so, yeah, I think that's becoming, and I don't know, again, if your experience tells you this in the States, but certainly some of the European funds are starting to follow suit and bring in kind of, engineering kind of capability in-house, which is quite new. But I think the trick is, back to your point, Owen, is then partnering that really closely with asset management, because you can be an engineer and you can be really kind of well versed on the sort of technical components, but if you don't have a budget or you don't have an asset to apply it to, you're kind of just spinning wheels. And so you've got to, that's why it's so important that you are, and I think, just working with the trust of, and being effectively just being an extension of the asset management team is where you need to be. And I'm talking there specifically about, I think, which is what you guys are interested in, which is, that decarbonization, technology-driven solutions at asset level. That part of the kind of sustainability capability, I think, is or should be within asset management 100%. I don't think it always needs to be C-suite, but I think which is probably not what you're saying, but I think it certainly needs to be the person who is charged with, fundamentally, like, they're the ones that are going to take the rap for, is this building performing, and am I actually going to see a return on it? I think, yeah, certainly at that level. So yeah, I get it, but I think in some ways you have to be sympathetic, but yeah, I think you do, to, in some ways, like when you do end up in that kind of ESG team or that sustainability team, quote unquote, trap, it's because that team has evolved from the position which we talked about earlier as a reporting data team that was just there as an extension to then deliver that outcome, what they were hired to do. And then suddenly they find themselves being asked to review, the latest solar PV provider. And they're like, okay. So I think
they're over their skis and they're going to make it worse. I mean, it's actually
and so
the point I was going to make,
failing.
which is, which I can be overly critical of. And I think it's like, maybe at times not doing me any favors in my career, but it's like, I think this coming purge of sustainability teams, where there's a lot of ESG bean counters that are going to be replaced by technology, I'm like, great, that can't happen fast enough, because it's like, I don't want to root for people losing their jobs, but just like it's a function that is not just useless or wasteful, I don't know what the right word, inefficient, but like becomes a burden. That person is in the room. That person then inserts themselves in things. That person then becomes another reviewer. That person then like becomes a barrier internally. Like, if we just remove that layer, you could get to the people who make decisions faster and more efficiently. I like the other day, one of the things we do at Cambio, like we do these discovery calls, and someone's like has their own workflow, how they organize data and how they get to decarbonization planning. And, of course we have a way we think it should happen with technology, but first we try to understand how they do it now. And we just like to map their existing workflow and like a process map and showing all the different complexities. And it gets kind of obvious how inefficient what they're doing is. But there's so many times where I'm like, I sit and listen to the team saying, well, I hired this consultant to then do this presentation in front of our asset managers so that they know how to use the software that I hired. So it's like, so you're the head of sustainability. All you do is organize a meeting where you have your consultant talk to your colleagues so that they know how to use the software that you bought. Like, what is the point of you? What are we doing? So it's, I just think like, well, there's a moment here where we all can acknowledge the three of us playing different roles, different hats, and what technology AI is going to do. Who knows, right? We're in a very transformational moment. But I think removing some of the waste is a good thing.
I think that's a key point, right? Transformational. I think we're going through a period of transition maybe not transformational, transition, that those teams, those individuals, and I was one of them, right, is they served the purpose that was needed at the time, and arguably kind of set the way for a lot of what is coming and is following. But I think that what's happening right now, and certainly this purge that you're referring to, and it's certainly real, right? It's happening here in the UK and Europe, is the need to swap out basically strategic thinkers and people that are kind of setting that vision or setting that strategy, and to some degree the kind of reporting capability that comes with that, and just bring in execution capability and bring in people that can deliver. And I think that's what, quote unquote, sustainability, certainly within kind of real estate, that's the thing that you're seeing. And so I think certainly to your point, is whether the same individual is currently feeling like they're going to have to do both roles and they're not doing either very well. But I think give it a few years, there'll probably be more clarity on, who owns what and actually how is that being delivered. I do think, it's worth pausing and saying that there are some unintended consequences of that, which I think for you guys focused on kind of decarb energy, we're kind of there, right? It's a no-brainer. Let's do it. Why are you in the room, as you say? We just need to speak to the asset manager. We can just get this done. There are some other issues which are not as mature and is not a well thought through, and there isn't the ROI and there isn't the kind of capability there, which still requires leadership. It still requires a business case. It still requires C-suite being convinced. And so I think there is a room for that, but it's probably just not in the room that you're trying to sell. Yeah.
Well, we're running up on time. I want to ask quickly before we get to our last questions, and Owen, feel free to jump in. But yeah, we've been dancing around getting to this point of, okay, Alex, like, what are you doing now? How did the entrepreneurial thing started? Owen asked a little bit, like, what prompted this move, but tell us a little bit more about what you're trying to do now. You have an advisory business, you have a podcast. I would imagine those two are related. Like, what's next for Alex? How's this all working?
Well, look, I mean, to be honest with you, it's the first time in my career in 20 years where I'm kind of just making it up as I go along. So, and it is quite scary, right? I've got two young boys, and this should be the time in my life where I'm sort of hunkering down and just hanging on to a corporate job. But it's, but I'm doing the opposite. And so, but I really am just making it up as I go along, right? It's the first time I did a podcast. Obviously, I really like doing that. I mean, probably like you guys do, I'm sure. I really enjoy having conversations with smart people. I want to learn more, and I do that to try and learn, but obviously also to try and raise profile. And then, when I sort of stepped away, I was thinking, like, who do I like working with? Like, who do I enjoy spending time with professionally? And it typically is on people that are creating solutions. That's the energy I like. That's the energy I like to surround myself with. I missed it when I was, if you like, on that sort of client buy side. When I was at JLL in the innovation role, obviously I was immersed in it. And so really that's what I want to connect back to. It's just, working with, speaking to, engaging with people that are trying to solve some of these problems. And I hope that I can offer them some value by having been on the inside. Right. When you're thinking of all the things you talked about, right? When you're thinking about selling in, this is how I would suggest you do that. And so really that's what, at least for the next probably year, and who knows, right? I mean, as I say, I'm making up as I go along, but certainly for the foreseeable, that's where I'm going to be spending my time. Is helping to kind of curate and help people with their strategy selling into real estate.
Yeah, that
And are
probably takes
you
really-
doing this? I was just
Go ahead.
curious. Are you doing this mostly in the UK? Or are you helping out companies in the US too?
So, I mean, at the moment, all my clients that are UK, well, they're not actually UK based, but they're trying to come to the UK, or they're selling into the UK. So that is, but actually increasingly it's companies that are coming from abroad to the UK that are obviously looking for support in sort of tailoring their product and suite. I am actually having conversations with someone in the States about sort of trying to do a quid pro quo, like, if companies are coming here and if companies are going there, is there a way that we can kind of work together? But like I said, I'm kind of making this up as I go along. I've got a number of kind of contacts in my ecosystem that are all, as you mentioned earlier, there's a bit of a purge, not just in, if you like, sustainability, but there's quite a few people that have just, for whatever reason, have decided enough's enough. And so sort of bridging kind of AI, tech, sustainability, all of that, bring that together. Is there something compelling we can offer the industry? So yeah, it's let's see. I mean, you know, who knows what I'll be doing in a year's time. But that's certainly what I enjoy doing, and I'm hoping that can create enough of a lifestyle for me that it keeps me going.
Yeah, that's what I was
It's
going to
awesome.
clarify. I assumed, based on your background and what I know of you, which isn't a ton, Alex, that your clients would be like LaSalle's or big
Mm.
REITs or the real estate companies. But it sounds like you're saying you want to advise the prop tech companies that are creating
Well,
solutions.
yeah, it's probably bad advice, but because they haven't got any money. But it's just more exciting. I just find it more appealing and it's just more interesting. And the energy of the people, right? It's just nothing against the real estate folk, but it's just a very different way of thinking. I do have a real estate client, and I'm obviously keen to help with them as well. But they, yeah, as you well know, right, the decision making is much slower. It's all about timing, and also at the moment, being quite frank, with AI, when you go and speak to anyone about technology, and I don't know what particularly you, Joel, I don't know what the response you're getting from large real estate companies, but whenever you talk to them about any kind of like procurement spend, it's like you just see like quivers in the back because they're like everything is allocated to AI. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's unless it's AI driven, we're not really doing anything at the moment, and so that's just something I think which we're going to have to navigate as people kind of realize, is it the magic bullet? Probably not. What does it actually look like? So I think we have to go over that hype curve.
Well, Owen, I'm going to wrap them up unless you got one more.
No, I mean, I think the thing that I take away from this conversation, it's kind of funny because Alex, I got into corporate sustainability as an energy manager in 2012. It was all about execution. There was no reporting. And then
Right.
over the last 14 years, it's taken this crazy, you know, direction towards reporting and compliance. But I think that the piece of this podcast that is going to stick with me the most is what you said about those teams sort of getting redesigned back to execution, which I think I'm so hopeful for because we need it. Um,
Yeah.
and so, like, I love that perspective. It's why I got into the industry in the first place, was to do projects and have an impact. And I don't think reporting has any impact. I just think we're checking boxes. So, no question. But that part of the podcast is going to stick with me for a while. So appreciate it.
Well, Alex, that's a good segue to our last question, which we always try to end with what Owen just said: optimism, hope. We're in a world where we focus probably too much on the negative news around the environment, sustainability, and lots of other things. We try to end the show with the opposite. So, Alex, what gives you hope for the future?
I mean, yeah, as you say, it's quite challenging at the moment when you turn on the news to have any kind of hope. Um, but I mean, I have to, right? But I do think that real estate has had its time, right, of being quite an easy asset class to make decent money, make a decent living, and sit back and kind of not, and it being quite passive. I think for a large chunk of the sector, that's going to be challenging, certainly over the short to medium term, because of the number of things. And I think that is going to force the industry and the individuals to skill up and learn how do we make our places, our buildings, whatever it is, better, higher quality, more optimized, better for the people that work in it, better for the people that visit it. So I think that's going to have to become more of the conversation, just by force of nature. So that should then be a catalyst for all the great solutions and great ideas that are out there that can support that. So that's what I hope anyway.
Well, it's a great message to end on, Alex. We are grateful for you joining us from the UK here late at night for yourself, and we know you're doing podcasts yourself. So I'll be waiting for my invite. I don't know. I haven't checked my inbox recently, but maybe that's coming to join your podcast. We'll see. But again, thanks for coming, Alex.
Well,
And
if you both turn up in London at the same time, then you're more than welcome to come on. So yeah,
yeah.
I haven't yet done a virtual one, but maybe that's in the pipeline.
Okay.
But look,
Yeah.
thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
I'll let you know when I'm in town. Last time I was in town, you blew me off, but maybe next time we'll get you to hang
I
out.
did. Yeah, that's true.
All right, Alex. Well, actually, before we wrap up, what do you want to plug? How do people find your podcast? How do they follow you? Is there a website for the business?
Yeah, so I mean, the future we build is what it's called. I mean, I'm sure if you put that into Google or LinkedIn, you'll find me. The future we build. Yeah, appreciate
That's
it.
the podcast. That's where you want people to go. Yep.
Yeah,
And I've been listening.
yeah,
It's great stuff. I think I even commented on one of your posts recently. The woman you had on from
you did.
Nuveen, I think. Yeah, because I was like, oh, and
Oh,
it was
there you
another.
go.
I don't know if you saw the post. It was this person he had on. I'm sorry, I don't. Well, you probably know her name, Alex. We should give her credit. What's the woman you had on from Nuveen?
Abigail Dean.
She kind of
Abigail
like
Dean.
she left sustainability into a larger role at her company, and it's something I think is important too for sustainability leaders. When you are someone like Alex, like I was critical of, there's some people who just want to check boxes, and I'm fine with those being purged. But there's a lot of great people that are leaders of sustainability that we need to find other roles for in these organizations because they
Mm,
can continue to like influence action. So I love when you hear these stories of someone who's graduated out of sustainability to get hired in the C-suite at a company. I think those are great stories.
yeah,
So we'll be
yeah,
following
no,
your
agreed.
podcast and more great stuff, Alex.
Great. All right, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Alex.
thank you again, Alex. Thank you, Owen. Thank you to our audience. You can find Owen and I on LinkedIn, usually actively antagonizing the more talk, more complaining sustainability crowd. You can find this podcast and more great content at letstalkmoreaction.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. And until next time, we encourage you to ask yourself, what are you doing to take action to make the world a better place?